Welcome everyone to the weekly crypto recap show where we bring all of the latest news in crypto to all of you. And welcome to the show. Today we have Chris Karabats, aka Zaphoid from SmartCash, and we have Chris Pacia, who is lead backend developer for Open Bazaar and Bitcoin Cash developer. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey.
Thank you. Thanks.
So let's start with, I want to talk first of all about Kick. I want to talk about this crypto defense fund that is going on. So essentially what has happened is some pretty exciting stuff. And I don't know what your take on all of this is, because I know there have been some people who are not quite as convinced that this is necessarily a good thing for whatever reasons. But right now, let me pull this up. So Kick, they are crowdfunding $5 million in crypto to help fight the SEC. So the SEC has gone after them for the giant ICO that they did for their KIN token, and they've decided to fight back. And we've covered a lot of these SEC pushback cases on this show. They've all been minor cases. They've all been like a slap on the wrist, naughty, don't do that. And this is the first like really big case that we're dealing with. And we've kind of been talking about how the SEC may be just kind of setting up a precedent, bringing all these small low-hanging fruit cases to set a foundation and set a precedent for when they go after larger companies. And this is the first one that's kind of said, no, we're going to fight back. So they put $5 million of their own money into this fund, and they're crowdfunding because they don't think that this is going to be enough money to cover all of their legal defenses. So what are your thoughts on what's going on here?
Well, they raised something like $98 million in their initial ICO. And so they're setting aside, 5% of that to defend themselves against the SEC and asking the rest of us to help with the rest. On the positive side, this does need to happen. Somebody needs to stand up to the SEC and fight with their, attempting to label all ICOs as securities and, try to set some good precedent for future ICOs. At the same time, I'm not necessarily sure that this particular ICO is the right one to do that. And the fact that they're asking people for extra money and trying to position themselves as, hey, defend us, you're defending all of crypto, is sort of shady.
Right.
And
Chris is providing some nice music for us. I've got.
I'm gonna ding too.
Yeah, ding too. Well, my phone's on as well, so I mean, maybe we'll all go off. God, this is terrible, people. Terrible, non-professional
like
behavior.
We've never done this before.
We've never done this before. Yeah, no, it's a little bit of a mix. I mean, I don't begrudge them for asking for contributions from the community, because this is something that is going to be a precedent-setting case. They say that it could be the new Howey test for crypto, and although I do understand the hesitation where they're like, oh, support us, you're supporting all of crypto. It is true in a way. And they have put $5 million of their own dollars in there. Like, they raised a huge amount of money. They put a lot of money into this themselves. So they've got skin in the game as well. And they're really...
Turned it off. This is what my dad does. Like, when I don't answer the first time, he just assumes he'll just keep calling until I answer.
Do you want to answer on the call? We'll wait. It's cool. Just tell him hi from us. If anyone has a note for Chris's dad, just post it in the power chat. We'll read that out on air to him. So it's a bit of a mix, but it's also kind of exciting watching this play out, and also a little bit scary, because if this doesn't go the right way, then this is going to be bad for crypto.
And that's kind of my concern here, is that, Livingston, there's video of Livingston talking during the ICO phase saying, hey guys, you need to put your money in here. Someday this will be super valuable, which is one of those big no things when it comes to Howey tests and whatnot, which is why they're trying to fight this, because they know that under the existing Howey tests, they're boned. But they're trying to say, oh no, we need a new Howey test for crypto, which I don't necessarily disagree with on an abstract level. It's just, again, these aren't necessarily the people who should be defending this and holding and making the precedent here, because they kind of obviously failed the existing Howey test. So I wish them the best of luck. I don't like that the SEC is trying to crack down on this. I don't think they have the right to decide what the average investor should or should not be able to put their money in. We all need to understand the context here is that if you're a security, you can only sell to accredited investors, which means they have at least $1 million in assets or earned something like $300,000 a year for the last 3 years. So obviously not to the average person. So we were so excited about the ICOs because it gave the average person the opportunity to get involved in projects early on. And yeah, the SEC is stamping down on that. And we don't.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, like most of your big returns come from are like on this type of early stage investing. And the government's like, oh, the only people who can get those big returns are people who are already wealthy. So yeah.
No, it's a crazy unfair system, and it's all under the guise of, well, we want to protect people. And as you said, there are giant barriers to entry for ordinary people having access to the same financial tools that very wealthy people do. Like, that's an incredibly fair situation that the government is propping up, all this talk about inequality. How about we start from the actual foundations and allow people the same opportunities, Oh, well, you don't have as much money, therefore your choices, you can't be trusted to make your own decisions. We'll make them for you, That's so patronizing and demeaning.
Yeah, it is. Just go away and let the grown-ups talk.
Yeah, let the rich people who know what they're doing talk. Like, it's absolutely terrible. So I wish them all the best, and I'm glad that there is someone who is going against the SEC and starting to fight them on this, because I do want to see a clear framework. I mean, all the agencies have been really hesitant to put out guidance, and they're kind of giving us piecemeal guidance that is not but legally binding, as they always say, and doesn't necessarily represent the ideas of the organization as a whole. So it's just kind of crazy that we're meant to exist in this very, very opaque framework that no one really understands. So the sooner we can get some clarity, have something like a case fought out, and someone with lots of resources to do a good job of it, I wish them all the best.
Yeah, I hope that they beat the SEC down. I won't be surprised if they fail horribly, but I do hope they are successful.
Absolutely. Let's move on. I want to talk about, so last week we talked about Craig's copyright on Bitcoin, and the big announcement that was released by CoinGeek, where they're like, this is the first official government agency to officially recognize Craig Wright as Satoshi. And then the Copyright Office, they actually made a statement which is kind of out of the ordinary for them, where they said, hang on, we don't recognize anything, we don't ever investigate the veracity of these statements, and it's not something that we will do in future, so we're just going on, we're presuming that the person filing these things is telling the truth, so we didn't recognize anything. That's not our job as an office. And so it's interesting because it brought up this point that a lot of people probably don't realize about the copyright system in the US, is that anyone can file a copyright claim on something. It costs $55. You put in some paperwork, you say, hey, I own this thing. And it's very, very easy. And so the fact that Craig is using this to sort of show like credibility about his claim to be Satoshi is interesting, and undermines him even more for anyone who understands how the Copyright Office works. And to kind of bring this point home, you have Wei Lui, who's the CEO of CoinSummer, and former CEO of the crypto fund Marvelous Peach Capital, and he has now registered a copyright for the Bitcoin white paper, claiming to be the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. And it just, I mean, he has also said, everyone can be Satoshi. So it's this idea, this idea that it's so easy to make this claim, and we shouldn't be giving weight to someone who does this. And just as a further to add to the farce, maybe we should all just be making copyright claims on this pseudonymous white paper.
Yeah, I mean, I just couldn't believe that. I mean, this was a total like scammer move. It was trying to like prey on people's ignorance about how the copyright system worked. Like, they had these pre-written press releases ready to go. Craig Wright officially recognized by the US government as Satoshi Nakamoto. They just had this stuff ready to go. And all it takes is for like one person who knows how the system actually works to point that out. And then they just look like a bunch of scammers, which is effectively what they are. And it's amazing that like their supporters were not deterred by this, right? Like, people are still repeating on Twitter that Craig was officially recognized by the government and he was granted a copyright. Of course, the government doesn't grant copyrights. That's not how they treat copyrights. So it's really unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and it does make me really sad that BSV community doubled down on this. They were like, see, he is Satoshi. Then when people were coming back at him, it's like, yeah, well, that doesn't disprove that he's Satoshi just because anyone can do it. It's like, you can't use both arguments there. You got to choose. Either this is giving credibility to it or it's not. And honestly, I agree with you, Chris. Like, it's just duping people who don't understand how this stuff works. And it's an easy dupe. It's really easy to fall in the trap and not understand these systems. They're complex, and no one really has to deal with copyrights that often. So it really probably is reeling in some more people who just don't really understand what's going on.
I was completely flabbergasted by the fact that BSV went up 100% as soon as this happened. Like, this means anything. And I did think it was hilarious that the Copyright Office actually made a press release saying, no, we don't recognize them as this. That's not what we're about. I mean, the Copyright Office never releases press releases about this kind of stuff. So I thought that was highly entertaining.
And that was probably a coordinated pump by them too.
Yeah, I presume so.
Yeah,
I assume so as well. I mean, it wouldn't take much of Craig's money or Calvin's money to make that little pump happen.
Especially when they've been
timing was just.
Yeah, especially when they've been kicked off all the big exchanges, and it's just small exchanges with little volume left.
Yeah,
it would. Yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. I don't understand. I want to ask some of these people if they're okay. Are you really believing this? Is there something wrong? But whatever. I mean, Craig refuses to prove he's Satoshi and keeps claiming certain actions prove he's Satoshi when they factually don't. So
did you see his article that he wrote today on this?
What did he say?
He wrote today?
Yeah, or is today or yesterday? So give me 1 second.
On CoinGeek?
No, on his personal blog. He I don't know. I tweeted it on Twitter.
See, he blocked me a long time ago on Twitter.
He's not on Twitter anymore.
Oh, is he not?
Yeah, he switched accounts or something because there were too many bots claiming to be him or reproducing his work, and he was claiming that they didn't have the right to, and he was going to them because that's what he does.
Just typical Craig style, isn't it? I am copywriting all my tweets.
It's funny. This blog post is called Satoshi and Science, and he goes through the scientific method and alluding to, because his whole articles are just he stops mid sentence and then goes on a tangent, but he's trying to imply that you can use the scientific method to figure out that he's Satoshi. And it's if you actually did that, there's 10 million pieces of evidence to the contrary. He's been forging documents and faking this and faking that and, all of this stuff. And so he goes on to say that he says, I'm choosing the court as the means to prove my identity as the correct place to determine truth. He says, if you believe that truth is obtained through a key, then you are seeking something other than Bitcoin. So can you imagine that?
That's the exact opposite of how it works, Craig. That's the exact opposite. So you're choosing this arbitrary group of people who don't really understand the tech or what's going on to determine truth rather than
and the courts, and I'm not even convinced he would win a court case given the amount of evidence against him. In fact, I think he's probably opened himself up to being countersued for malicious prosecution. But the courts, they rule based on, the civil courts rule based on what's called preponderance of the evidence. So basically, it's you put the evidence on a scale and you weigh it. And so if 51% of the evidence seems to suggest that the one party's correct, then you rule in favor of that one party. So it could literally be the case where the jurors say, hey, I think there's a 49% chance that he's lying, but then they still have to rule in his favor, right? So that, obviously a 49% chance that someone's lying is not conclusive proof, right? Even if he got a ruling in his favor, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh my goodness, this whole thing, I just don't know what to say about it. That hasn't already been said, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just solidly trying to baffle everybody with bullshit.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, they say, what's the saying? They muddy the waters to make it look deep. You know, the people who do these complex, weird, intricate things in order to, like, obscure things, they're trying to bullshit you. Just, you know, if there's too much of that stuff going on, you really need to take a step back.
I also noticed he's been changing his tune. So he writes at the so originally he said that he was part of a group of people who created Bitcoin, or he was the leader of a group of people who created Bitcoin. Now he's saying, yes, I am Satoshi Nakamoto. It was my pseudonym. I was not a group. I did it by myself, but I had help from other people. I had a little bit of help from other people, basically implying they were more or less consultants, but he did all the work, right? So, I mean, it's already like just contradicting his own like public statements on this. And I mean, he's just full of shit.
It's so unusual for him to contradict something he's previously said. So anyway, enough about Craig. We are done with that. So Chris, I want to talk to you. Chris, you're both Chris. Pacia, I want to talk to you in particular about this. So Bitcoin Cash miners apparently undo an attacker's transactions with a 51% attack. This happened this week. Can you walk us through what happened here and what transpired, what the attack was, etc.?
Yeah. So last November, when we changed one of the consensus rules in Bitcoin, I believe it was the clean stack rule so there was one rule that nodes were currently enforcing as like a mempool policy, like if transactions violate this rule, don't allow them into the mempool. And then we just made it a consensus rule that like if they violate this rule, don't allow them in blocks. But what happened was some people accidentally sent Bitcoin Cash to SegWit addresses. And so obviously SegWit is on the BTC chain. So these are people who accidentally sent coins to the wrong address on the wrong chain. And the result was when we made that change on the last hard fork, those coins became unspendable. The SegWit coins did. And so now they were already kind of sort of unspendable, because if you broadcasted a transaction trying to spend those coins, anyone else could have saw you broadcast that and then like stolen your coins. Like they could try to like front run you and what have you. So yeah, so basically some unknown miner came in and tried to mine up all the SegWit coins that people accidentally sent coins to SegWit addresses on BCH. And interestingly enough, the BTC top mining pool, I think possibly with one coordinated with one other one, maybe BTC.com, maybe, I think. But they kind of made a decision to reject that block that unknown miner mined containing all those coins. And they mined essentially they rejected that block and they mined on essentially a parallel chain, causing a 2-block reorg on BCH. And then what they actually did was they sent those SegWit coins, and this was kind of ingenious. They sent those SegWit coins to addresses on the BCH chain that could be unlocked using the key that was found in the SegWit script. So basically they enabled it so that the rightful owners of that money can actually spend the coins rather than them being stolen by this unknown person, and rather than them taking the coins themselves. And so, I mean, it was kind of an interesting thing. It was also interesting that they were able to do this in such a short period of time, to like recognize this was happening and then somehow configure their code bases to orphan that block. And so it actually, one unlucky pool pro hashing actually mined on top of the other block that contained the attacker's block. And so their block got orphaned too, and they were kind of pissed off about that. But I mean, some people were saying that this is like a 51% attack on BCH. And I guess it kind of depends. So I've got a couple of thoughts on that. I guess it depends on, how you define a 51% attack. I mean, typically when the miners do this and it's something you like, the developers tend to call it a soft fork, right? Because this has happened. Right? If they do something you don't like, they call it a 51% attack. So, I mean, go ahead.
Isn't this essentially what CZ was talking about doing on the Bitcoin chain?
Yeah,
after his
basically.
finance
Yeah.
hack? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the kind of general idea.
Yeah, same sort of thing. And except by the time CZ was talking about it, it was way too late. Like these guys caught it within like one block, and they only orphaned 2 blocks. So
it's amazing that they fixed it so fast.
yeah. But also, I would kind of point out too, I don't know what percentage of hashing power they had on the Bitcoin Cash network at that time, but it's always been possible for any miner to orphan 2 blocks with a little bit of luck, right? So if you look at like the Bitcoin white paper has a table in there showing you like the probability that a single miner with different amounts of hashing power can orphan 2 block or 1 block, 2 block, 3 block, 4 blocks. And that's how we ended up coming up with the 6 block requirement for waiting like 6 blocks is basically the probability that a miner with like 10% mining power could override 6 blocks just based strictly on luck is like really, really low, right? So that's how we get the number. But the probability of overriding 2 blocks is not that low. So, I mean, it's always kind of remains possible. You don't need 51% mining power to do that. Although that pool, BTC Top, whether they had 51% mining power on Bitcoin Cash or not, I don't know, but they did have plenty of mining power on BTC that they could have pulled it over if they wanted to. So that's the story.
That is the story. Do you have anything more to add to that, Zaphoid?
Not really. It's part of what proof of work is, and we are somewhat relying on good actors here. And the same is true for Bitcoin. If a couple of Bitcoin pools got together and decided they could probably 51% attack Bitcoin in the same way. It's good that they fixed a problem that was created a while ago. Unfortunate that they had to fix it, but it's just one of those things that people will talk about how Bitcoin Cash is centralized and whatnot because of this, but really this could happen to any coin.
Absolutely. Before I move on, I just want to give a shout out to JR. He's the first one to use the smart sticker super chat things that they have in YouTube now. Apparently you can like send super stickers, like animated thingies. So that was really cool. Thanks, JR. I really appreciate that. And just so you know, I think Bitbacker is up and running again. But we do have exciting news that we are announcing this week, but because you guys are tuning in, I'll tell you a secret. So Bitbacker has been acquired, and I'll be an advisor on the new company that it's going to be absorbed into. So you'll get all the same features you have at the moment. You'll have like the same anonymity functions, you'll have the same non-custodial functions, but you'll get a heap more features. So that is pretty exciting there. And there's no need to there's going to be a new app that's launched soon. There's no need to create a new account on there necessarily, because all of your stuff from Bitbacker will be transferred over. So it's pretty cool. So that was just an aside that I wanted to mention before we move on. Same access to all of the coins that we currently got on there, and hopefully adding some more as well. Let's talk a little bit about this Bitcoin toxic culture, right? There have been a bunch of tweets happening in crypto Twitter, some interesting fights going on about this, some back and forth, he said, she said type things. People talking about Blockstream, and they're fueling this toxicness, and then there's Blockstream pushing back and saying, no, we're helping, and it's everyone else. So do you guys want to talk about this a little bit? Just give an overview of what happened here. It seemed like it was a feud between Samson Mao and Matt Carollo. But do you guys want to talk a little bit about where this came from?
Do you want to go ahead, Chris?
I may not be the best person because I tend to avoid Twitter drama as much as I can because it's Twitter drama and life's way too short. But people complaining about toxicity in this is stupid. It's Twitter. It's a naturally toxic place, and B, it's the internet. What do you want? What do you expect to happen here? You got a bunch of people, high energy, high drama. You have Bitcoin developers pissed off about Blockstream for whatever reason, and then attacking people, and other people saying, oh yeah, a bunch of people have left Bitcoin for Ethereum because they don't want to deal with Bitcoin developers. And then there are people complaining that Twitter is just too harsh, and like, the culture is toxic. Like, no, the Bitcoin culture is way more than Twitter. You just happen to have crypto Twitter. That's a little group of conceptual people who just yell at each other or pat each other on the back, depending on the situation. And and that's not the entirety of the culture. Reddit's not the entirety of the culture, whatever. I just don't think that you can tag the whole Bitcoin or the whole crypto culture based on crypto Twitter, and even based upon negative interactions between Bitcoin developers. I mean, negative interactions between Bitcoin developers has been going on for years. This is not new. B, any organization, any group of people will have negative interactions, and it's just Bitcoin people like to do it way out in the open.
But would you say that there's any truth to this claim from Matt saying that Blockstream is behind a lot of this negativity? I mean, I've been at the I've had to deal with the hatred, not just from like the blockchain maximalist Blockstream people, but I deal with hate from everyone. So I just recently put out a video for Magical Crypto Conference, and the amount of people who like messaged me saying, this is disgusting, fuck you, terrible, like it's just, they were just like going into me because they're like, these people destroyed Bitcoin, therefore you can die. And I'm like, whoa, I created a fun video with like, Charlie Lee rapping, and you unleash this hate? Like, is it really a reasonable reaction to the actual video I put out there? But it doesn't just come from people who hate Blockstream, it comes from people who love Blockstream. Like, they're talking about Ragnar in one of these articles, like, he's someone I blocked. He was the first person I ever blocked on Twitter because he just like, he wouldn't stop. I'd post videos about my grandmother, and it'd be like, a little 94-year-old lady talking about Mulberry Pie, and I'd get some like a nasty comment from him on the video saying like, you have no credibility after your Roger Ver fiasco, you're disgusting, you can't call yourself like, and I'm just like, this what's this have to do with my nan? I hope she doesn't read this. Like, so it's like, I mean, it does seem like there is this very intense tribal warfare going on that is not new. It's been going on for a really long time.
I'm surprised they're just waking up to this now, with Blockstream in particular, because I mean, this has been going on for years. In fact, it was one of the most jaw-dropping moments in this space was when Blockstream, who this was several years ago, 3 years ago, maybe longer. Blockstream has this reputation of being like the most toxic company in the space with just a bunch of toxic individuals. And Samson Mal, before he worked for Blockstream, had the reputation of being like the most toxic person in the community, right? And so when Blockstream announced that they were hiring Samson Mal, it was just like, yeah, you guys have this massive reputation problem in the community, and you turn around and you hire a guy who himself has this massive reputation problem, and you could only predict what was going to come of that. And not surprisingly, I mean, Blockstream didn't really improve from that. So, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with Matt Corallo's tweet, but I will also say, I mean, Matt has himself participated in a lot of that. I don't really follow him that much anymore, but I don't know if he's turned over a new leaf, but
they do seem to enjoy the drama. Someone, I mean, you remember, Greg Maxwell offered to support Craig Wright in the BCH BSV fork. They do seem to enjoy stirring the pot, but they're not the entirety of the Bitcoin culture by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, exactly. And there's and that's always what, I mean, it always surprises me. I talk to people who just aren't involved in the tribalism at all, who are out there building amazing, exciting things, and their the whole purpose isn't to like bring down another specific coin. They're just like, well, we're focused on what we're doing cool things. I don't even keep track of what's going on over there. It does seem like it's sort of filtering itself. Like these people, like the group, I think is growing smaller and it's getting more intense, but more and more people kind of leaving and just saying, well, I'm going to go elsewhere and just kind of focus on building for the future. And the people within the tribal warfare would argue that they're building for the future as well, but I would say that they're not doing it quite as efficiently if so much energy is being spent on all of these like online games. And I don't know, it just seems a bit exhausting to me, and is not particularly what I enjoy being involved with in crypto. I'm a very non-confrontational person and enjoy the exciting nature of this space. So it's whenever I come across people like that, I just tend to take a step back or try to imbue some fun in the situation if there's none there already.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you can really do. I mean, there are going to be people who are very trouble about this, but that's just how people are. I mean, but the people who actually get stuff done care a lot less about calling everybody else in the space a scammer.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move on from here. I want to talk about Tezos. That's pretty exciting. They're a protocol that's based around the idea of being able to change things on chain, so that you don't have these crazy fights and forks and create these tribal cultures. Like, it's the ability to make some changes, and they have just made their first upgrade to the network based on a vote in the system, which is really cool. So the Tezos blockchain has now officially been upgraded. This is the first, and there are two separate backwards incompatible changes that have been activated after 3 months of on-chain voting by stakeholders. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about this and why this might be important?
Tezos has an interesting method of on-chain governance. They claim that over 81.39% of all Tezos roles did participate in this, and that a supermajority of these roles approved the change. So that's good. It's exciting for the people on chain, even though that they've had complaints about so-called whale voters and the like. We talked about that, I think, a few weeks ago when a single whale voter came in to change the results of one of the votes. But they're dealing with their own issues there, and that's just part of the voting process, to figure out how exactly to manage getting consensus while it's hard to get people even involved. But it's exciting, the system they set up for the on-chain upgrade. It seems like a reasonable way to go about things, really automating it. But it could be an important step forward. We'll have to see how it survives for the next several upgrades and how things progress with it and how automated it continues to be. It's certainly cleaner than forcing everybody to install the same version of the software at the same time. So that's a good thing. Other coins have similar things where they have sporks built into either their masternode systems or stuff like that, where they end up having everybody upgrade and then activating the change of the specified block later. This is a bit different than that, the way they're doing it. But I'm hopeful for them that they can continue with this on-chain governance, and they do have good wins behind them with the fact that Coinbase custody service does allow staking of Tezos, so they do have some good movement and good strength behind them if they can keep things going appropriately.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, what this means for the space, because you were talking about the difference between this and a hard fork, for example. Like, I remember I was chatting to Eric Lombroso at the start of the year about, how he feels about changes to Bitcoin and all of these things, talking about, like, is he against, like, the specific changes, or is he against the method of the changes? And what it comes down to, like, all the things that we discussed, he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, maybe he'll come on the show and clarify if I get it wrong, but he basically said, he's not against, like, necessarily a block increase. He's not against, like, any of these things that are being proposed. The problem is that hard forks can be dangerous, and they create splits, and they divide people and resources, and they're bad security for the network, all of these things. And so it's that method that is really against. And I think that a lot of people feel the same way, that they really just don't like the idea of a hard fork because they think that it's not good for security. Now, if you like dividing hash power, for example, then it makes the network more insecure. So the idea of creating and experimenting with a new way to implement changes, because I mean, Arthur and Kathleen started Tezos because they were looking at all the incredible innovative things that people were coming up with in space, and they were getting a little bit frustrated that Bitcoin wasn't implementing any of them. They weren't, had all these privacy functions that they were just like, no, we can't implement them. And so they're getting frustrated because, I mean, they recognize the issues that come along with implementing changes through like a hard fork, for example. So they wanted to create a system where it was easier to integrate changes, not super easy because you don't want to, add that seems like another security, like a threat vector there. But, it does seem like I'm pretty interested in this experimentation of a new way to do this. And I'm interested to see how this works out. And this could be something that other chains might adopt going forward if it works.
Yeah, I need to look into a little bit more exactly how they manage the software upgrade at their, whatever they call their miners. It's some different word that I always forget when I'm about to say it. They're bakers. Sorry. They have bakers in Tezos.
Bakers.
Yeah. Whatever people like saying. But, I don't know exactly what that process is like on a technical level.
I'm actually going to be doing an interview with Arthur and Kathleen later on today, and I'll probably post that this weekend sometime, so they can talk about the process, how all that works, answer all your questions. If anyone does have questions that they want me to ask them about how it all works, then let me know, and I'll be sure to send that to them. I want to talk about crypto around the world. So just give you an overview of what's happening in different jurisdictions, because it's pretty exciting. Let's start with the US, because generally it's all negative with the US. We talked earlier about the SEC, the big battle that's coming up, the overreach there, how we dislike it. But now you have US lawmakers that are urging Trump advisor Larry Kudlow to promote blockchain. What's going on there? People who are actually interested in tech and excited about it and want to see it supported more in America. This is very much out of the ordinary. Did you guys look into this at all? This bipartisan letter that was it was spearheaded by Trey Hollingsworth and Darren Soto, and it basically asked the National Economic Council to host a forum on this new technology and include blockchain on the list of technologies that the Trump administration will support. It seems kind of positive that I want to take a step back and wonder what the catch is.
Well, I always have to differentiate between blockchain and cryptocurrency in these sorts of things.
That's the catch.
Not necessarily thrilled about cryptocurrencies, just about how blockchain might make life easier for, all the things like iced tea and whatnot. No, seriously, though, financial services, healthcare, insurance, the things that, blockchain would probably be helpful for as the technological back end to whatever. But, this is not necessarily anything positive about crypto, even though people like to present anything positive about blockchain as being positive about cryptocurrency in general, which is simply not true. And I'm not sure what regulatory clarity may be affecting pure blockchain related stuff, because it's just a tech they could use. I mean, Amazon even has a, one-click start up your own blockchain. But I do agree with him that is necessary for the U.S. to be, continue to be a world leader in technological innovation, that we do clarify the regulation on cryptocurrency. But again, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin are never mentioned in the letter.
I see. So it's not about creating any sort of safe harbor for people who are dealing with crypto in this space. It's about applying this blockchain word and, kind of missing the point of all of this about why it's important. So maybe we shouldn't get too excited.
Yeah, I hate to, rain on everybody's parade who gets excited about stuff like this, but
they're so tricky in their articles when they say things like, we might have people in favor who might want to create favorable economic conditions for companies. And you're like, that would be great. And then you realize that it's some self-interested, ridiculous thing that isn't really going to help anyone. So that's, listen, I'd say it's net neutral. because it's not bad. It's not like they're saying, hey, we're going to ban Bitcoin. And it's not necessarily that good where they're saying, hey, there's a safe harbor and no regulation and anyone can just create things and it's up to the individual to have individual responsibility and choose products and that they have researched themselves and all of that. It's kind of in the middle, right?
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle.
All right, so that's US. We move to Australia. Australian Securities Watchdog, they've just updated their guidance on crypto assets and ICOs. Australia has not been favorable to crypto, despite all the rhetoric you hear where they're like, yeah, they're embracing this tech. Oh yeah, they want to replace the chess system, which is like their SWIFT system, with blockchain. Yeah, they're doing all these things. When it comes down to it, Australia is anti-encryption. They don't want any privacy for online transactions or online movements or websites that you visit. They monitor everything very openly. And you know, they crack down on people. Like there was a guy who is facing 10 years in prison for mining crypto with his work, which is just the most crazy draconian sentence that I've ever heard of. So they're issuing guidance. It's good that they're issuing guidance. Again, clarity is always better than crazy obfuscating the situation that America has. But it says that these regulatory requirements are in place to maintain the integrity of Australia's financial market and ensure consumer protection. Always have to take sentences like that with a grain of salt. Sometimes it's just power.
Grain of salt.
Yeah, maybe a boatload.
Just assume they mean the opposite.
Boatload of salt. Yeah, no, it's just it's a power thing, and it says that Australian laws will also apply even if the ICO or crypto assets are promoted or sold to Australians from offshore. So it's the same deal that the SEC is having. Like if you deal with any US customers, then it comes under the SEC. If you deal with any Australian customers, it comes under the Australian regulations here. So Australia trying to follow in Daddy America's footsteps, and we want to play too and have overreach across the world. It's not necessarily good.
Couple things related to that. I read an article from Germany talking about Australian like encryption laws, or rather lack of encryption laws. And I was talking to a guy I know from Australia who had a letter from the ATO, their tax office, about demanding all this documentation from 8-9 years ago, whatever, and he sent them a letter back with the help of his lawyer, essentially saying screw off, and they responded and saying, oh yeah, oops, sorry, we're not allowed to ask for that actually, just 4 years back.
What?
So they're totally screwing with anybody who doesn't push back, just like the tax people always do. It's like, well, we didn't have the right to ask for it, but we did, and they gave it to us, so you're screwed now. It's so.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So he's still working with his tax lawyer on this, obviously, but they are trying to play games there.
God, they put people's lives on hold, don't they? Yeah, people who are in the industry, like if they were early into crypto, they're probably building in crypto as well. They're probably working on developing this tech and creating awesome things, and yet these officers, these bureaucrats come in and they essentially force people to put their lives on hold. All their resources get put towards dealing, paying for lawyers and dealing with this. All their time, bandwidth gets put towards pulling up receipts that don't exist and getting all this crazy documentation. And what is this really what we want in a society? People who are putting all those resources towards that sort of thing rather than resources towards building tech that could make the world a better place? Like, imagine the world we'd live in if all of our hours were just productively put towards things that we're excited about and wanted to build, rather than having to deal with all this crazy compliance that I don't see it helping. I don't see it helping anyone. I look at these supposedly regulated industries that are still hurting so many people because the laws are being created by people who have their own special interests and who are being easily corrupted by other special interest groups, and all of this is under the guise of protection, but I don't see it protecting anyone. I just see it as a mass draining of resources that makes me so sad.
If we just save one grandma her retirement, it's all worth it. It's if you're against this, you're obviously against people having safe financial transactions.
Boy, oh boy,
That's
oh
how they
boy.
portray it.
Oh.
That's what they talk about. So
Boy, oh boy.
it's entirely garbage under the guise of protecting people.
Yeah. Let's move on to China. So, China authorities probe alleged illegal Bitcoin mining sites at hydro plants. I mean, we have not seen China respond favorably to crypto at all. They've had a strange relationship with it. You've seen the most Bitcoin miners in the world all based in China. You've seen all the hardware being developed there. You've seen China. I mean, it's really been right involved in crypto from the start. And when you had China bans years ago, you saw giant crashes in the market, for example. And then China was like, oh no, it's not really banned, but you can't mine it. And then like all these, they kind of go back and forth trying to figure out how they're going to deal with it. But it is clear that they're not being particularly lenient. So apparently, in the Sichuan province, there are local Bitcoin mining farms that have been apparently constructed without official approval. So, again, China is a country where you need approval for everything, not unlike the rest of the world, even though the propaganda would suggest otherwise. But it's sad because there are a lot of people, like in China, you have a huge amount of people who are just trying to get their resources out of there because it gets, seized by the government so easily. Things are being nationalized so easily. So people are looking for buying property overseas. They're looking to Bitcoin as a way to safeguard their wealth. And the government really cracks down on this.
Yep, somebody there didn't pay off the right government official.
Yeah.
But I mean, what would, interestingly enough, at a higher level, putting Bitcoin mining farms around hydroelectric plants is really quite an efficient way to do it because hydroelectric places have, there's the demand curve for electricity from these hydro places. And during times of cheap power, the Bitcoin farms there can very efficiently use that power to generate profitability, where otherwise a lot of that power would be wasted or just not used otherwise. So it's actually, when they talk about how Bitcoin's, it's using as much power as Norway or whatever the latest country it's supposedly oversizing this power usage, it doesn't ever take into consideration how efficiently it uses that power because of the way Bitcoin mining units can be turned on and off. I mean, yeah, having your wind farm turned on and off in relation to the wind, sucks for people who are trying to get power from the wind farm, but for Bitcoin mining places, it just turns on and off as the power comes and goes. It doesn't matter as much, and the Bitcoin farms are very good at using this efficient energy and locating themselves where they can get cheap power because they're very portable. Even though you're talking about huge amounts of equipment, it can really just go anywhere there's internet connection. So I expect this isn't really a big deal as much as somebody didn't get paid off at the right time in China, and so now they're talking smack about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it does worry me though that that type, you can't really hide that amount of power usage, right? And so I'm willing to bet if someone wanted to figure out the location of every Bitcoin miner on the planet, they could do so just by looking at power usage numbers, which is concerning from a security and decentralization standpoint and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it absolutely is. They actually had a big crackdown in Venezuela from this same thing. So in Venezuela, they've capped the price of electricity, and they fixed the price. So electricity in Venezuela is crazy cheap, and you had a bunch of people mining Bitcoins, and this was kind of a lifeline for them. And then years ago, there was this giant sting operation where they went to the industrialized areas and raided all of these places, and we don't know what happened to those people, but I presume that, they were not given a slap on the wrist and told naughty. I presume these people were thrown in jail or worse. So it is scary when you have these authoritarian governments and people trying to just live and find ways to do this, and then they have to deal with the consequences of that when they get found out. But you're right, Chris, it's really scary. How do we, if we're talking about Bitcoin as the future, and the Bitcoin is the future of monetary freedom and monetary autonomy, if it's so easy to track these miners, what kind of a future is that going to look at? Do we need to look into other methods of mining? Do we need to look more into proof of stake? What's the best course forward that's going to make us the most free?
Mm-hmm.
I see it becoming more and more decentralized. You're going to have places floating in the ocean using wave power to mine Bitcoin. You're going to have, portable wind farms. I mean, in Venezuela, after the crackdown, they just moved. So now people are buying cheap oil and literally burning cheap oil and generators to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the allure. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. But part of the allure of proof of stake is you don't have this issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just have people on their home computers, on their home internet connection, and you can't really tell the difference between them and someone who's just streaming Netflix or something.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very intrigued with seeing where proof of stake comes out, and that's why we're playing with it too. So we'll have to see how that goes out in the long run.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move on to Egypt. So they've apparently just lifted their ban, and now they will allow licensed cryptocurrency companies. So it's, again, companies getting approval from the state before they can operate. It's better than a total ban. So they do appear to be loosening some of their restrictions there, which is interesting. And also, I mean, you're looking at some of the countries that are loosening restrictions. You could see where they have a lot to gain from something like that. A country like Egypt, it could be very helpful for the people there to have access to free money. So I'm definitely hopeful about this, but I just don't know enough about the government there to know, where this is going to lead, how free this is going to be, etc.
Well, it's a proposed bill, so we all know how proposed bills go.
Right.
Everybody gets excited and then disappears. But also, the bill gives the board of directors of the Central Bank of Egypt the right to regulate cryptocurrencies and require licenses.
Right. Well, previously, all cryptocurrency was banned under Islamic law, and now it does seem like they're loosening that a little bit, but still keeping it very centralized and controlled there.
You're not going to have the cryptocurrencies bring down the Central Bank of Egypt when it's the Central Bank of Egypt that's regulating them.
They figured it out. Very smart, Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to mention, or otherwise I'll move to the UK just to give an overview of crypto in the world? Nope.
Let's move
All right.
on.
UK. So a different track. So UK University is fingerprinting National Archives with blockchain. It's a common theme that we're seeing across a lot of different universities at the moment who are dealing with blockchain technology, especially when they have databases that they don't necessarily want centralized or controlled by any particular university. Like, for example, I mentioned on the show last week, and I'll be releasing a video with this about Flow, about how Caltech is actually using Flow to store all of these reports and white papers and research papers that people are building there, because they don't necessarily want the university to have control of that reservoir of information. They don't want that to be centralized. They want it accessible no matter whether the university allows it to be accessible or not. So they've started to put everything on the blockchain so that it is accessible, which is really interesting. And now you're dealing with a kind of similar thing. They're securing digital government records on national video archives around the world against tampering. So again, kind of using blockchain tech for uses other than cryptocurrency. So they're using blockchain tech and artificial intelligence, our two favorite buzzwords. So that's kind of interesting there, just using blockchain for its security features, for its immutability, etc. I think that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it's just more of the blockchain tech being used everywhere, and which I do agree that overall that's a positive, because as people get more faith in blockchain as a trusted tech in all these other areas, it'll be more likely that people will accept it in a currency.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of headlines before we finish off. So apparently, the liquidators of Cryptopia, we've been talking about Cryptopia a lot, about what's going to happen. They recently announced that they're going to liquidate. The founder of that is starting a new exchange or something. Apparently, they owe creditors 2.7 million. Is what has been revealed after the first report on their financial situation has been released. So that's interesting. I don't know where they're going to get that from at the moment. So I'm not sure anyone have anything to add on that. Otherwise, just a couple more things I want to mention.
Well, it was interesting how Cryptopia was all, we're going to, don't worry, we're bringing everything back up. Then they had an update, I believe, on April 26th. They said, oh, we'll keep you updated on that. And then they went silent for a few weeks and the liquidators came in. So apparently they either found more missing than they thought, or they just decided they couldn't manage it.
Right. Now you've got Salesforce, the cloud giant. They've just unveiled their first blockchain product. Because Salesforce is huge. You go to any major city and like the tallest building there is usually the Salesforce building. So them getting involved in blockchain is really interesting. They're basically using it to deal with client relations management. Anything you guys want to add before I go on to the last topic?
More blockchain stuff, but Salesforce is also apparently pressuring several of their customers, including Camping World, to stop selling quote unquote military style weapons or stop using their product. So, they're not necessarily good guys.
Yeah. And then the final thing about not necessarily good guys is Facebook's supposed global coin, which is how it's referred to
Not
internally.
necessarily good guys.
Not necessarily good guys, the devil. Sorry, because I am live streaming on Facebook. Hi, everyone who's watching from Facebook. I really need to quit this dirty habit, but, it is what it is. There's lots of things going on internally. They haven't released any official statements really about this, but we do know that it's referred to as global coin, which is kind of a terrifying name.
Of all the names.
I know.
Thanks for spelling it out.
Yeah. It's like, we refer to
Amazing.
Bitcoin as like a world currency, but it's like this kind of free, open thing. Whereas when you're talking about Facebook, the company that spies on all of us, and has a tremendous amount of power, and they're saying like global coin, we're now going to spy on your financial transactions too. But I'm glad that they're talking about this because we don't mention this enough, right? We're always talking about how bad Facebook is. We're always talking about how bad Google is. They're spying on us. These are private companies that are doing bad things. We never talk about Chase doing the same thing, or Citibank doing the same thing, or any of the major banks where they literally, part of their business model is taking our transaction data and selling it. Yet, where is the rhetoric about these companies that are constantly spying on us and selling our data? I want to hear more people up in arms about this. So now that we have a company that is notorious for spying, talking about their global coin, hopefully this will bring this narrative back into, mainstream discussion, because I think it's crazy that we're not talking about how every financial decision we make is tracked.
Oh, there are two things about this. One, the New York Times headline from February about how Facebook and Telegram are hoping to succeed where Bitcoin failed. Bitcoin hasn't failed. Screw you, New York Times. Thank you. But the other thing I thought I had was, 30, 40, whatever years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, if you thought like, the government or your computer or your car, whoever was spying on you, you were, a tinfoil hat crazy. Where now, if you don't think they're spying on you, you're absolutely ignorant. It's basically assumed that everybody is spying on you and tracking you at all times now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little crazy. I am looking more into. I've another thing that I can announce on here. I'm starting Naomi's privacy basket, where I'm collecting my favorite privacy products from all my favorite companies and packaging them together and sending out links so you know where to get them. I think that we need to become a lot more privacy conscious as a population and realize what the stakes are right now, and start to protect ourselves a little more, start to be a little bit smarter when we're purchasing things, and maybe not using our credit card for everything. I know that the points are really, they really want to get us with those. We're like, but I get 3 times the points if I pay for my food. But that's how they get you. They reel you in with these wonderful deals, and I'm not sure that it's that worth it in the end. So I'll be letting you know some cool things that you can be using to protect yourselves in some upcoming episodes.
Speaking of protecting yourself and privacy, you all did hear a couple days ago that Google Chrome will be blocking ad blockers moving forward.
They will be blocking ad blockers.
Yeah, so their API changes mean that the ad blockers for your consumer Google Chrome will stop working.
Oh wow,
Wow.
that's terrible.
That-
Everyone needs to move to Brave. Do it immediately. Number 1 in Naomi's privacy class. Move to Brave.
That'll drive.
browser.
I think that'll drive a lot of people off of Chrome.
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'll never use it again. I block everything on Chrome. I mean, there's so much
Uh-huh.
malware that comes to your computer through advertisements and so much tracking. And it's not just like, oh, cool, that's a nice dress, Naomi. Like, it's not just that exciting thing you see on the surface. It's like there's a lot of dangerous stuff happening underneath all those advertisements.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're claiming maybe not, but no, it's so apparently if you're an enterprise user of Chrome, so if you have like an enterprise Google account, you'll still be able to use full ad blockers.
Is that a paid thing?
I guess I might have one. I don't
Those-
know.
Those asses. Oh my God.
But yeah, so
Okay,
the average
right.
user will not be able to do that apparently. So be aware as you're watching those updates go by and look at things like Brave.
Absolutely. Well, that does wrap up our 3 weekly crypto recap shows that you got today. Thank you so much for the people who tuned back into the 3rd one. I'm not sure, again, if anyone has any tips for getting Zoom and Streamlabs to work with each other, because somehow just Echoes just started, don't really understand why. But I would love any advice you have for why that might have happened, because I don't know, but I will be spending the rest of my day researching it. I hope you guys spend the rest of your day having fun and gearing up for the weekend. Let me know all the fun things that you'll be doing, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, JR, for sending through my first ever sticker super chat thing. That was really cool. I appreciate that. And thank you so much, Chris and Chris, for being here on the show. Always an absolute delight to have both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us. It's always fun. Now it's
Oh.
time to go take my kid to a dance recital.
Oh, that's so cool. You have to let us know about it. Maybe you can reenact it for us on the next show or something.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
Where's
many
Archer's...
sparkles and so much pink and so
Wait,
much pink.
where's Archer's bullseye? He might send a super chat asking you to do that, and then you'd have to do it, Chris. All right, make sure you send your power chats. Ask Chris to reenact his kids' dance recital. It's going to be great. But you guys go and have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy yourselves wherever you are in the world. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I'll see you guys for the next video. Bye.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
All right.